Can you folks hear me? Mansi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Okay. Mr. Jitin Handa will also join us.
Yes, sir. He's just joined.
I have made you and Gaurav co-host.
Yeah, hi Harsh.
Hi, Subinder.
Okay,
Wonderful to see you.
same here. Let me just make sure my settings are all right.
Right. So people are trickling in, and we will start as soon as there's a good number of students there.
Great.
One problem which we encountered last few sessions, even though I have subscribed for, maybe you can give me a clue. We subscribed for Zoom for a higher subscription, but somehow in last two sessions, so we have a subscription for 500 students, but it did not permit, at least in last two sessions, more than 100. So I hope that situation does not happen here.
Oh, I
again.
see.
So we'll see when that number is relevant. Right.
Let's try this. Okay, you can see me now, right?
Somehow the Zoom people, they don't have much support system. For technical support at least, they only have it for business account, and mine is for educational purpose, individual account. So they just did not entertain. So if you have any technical problem, there's no one you can reach.
Hmm.
That's surprising because their business is really big now.
Yeah, but I guess they're geared up for, like most of these new age companies,
Yeah.
they're not geared up for support in the usual sense.
Right. It happened too sudden for them, and they haven't necessarily.
Also, the way they build up their cost structures, they don't plan on. And also, you know that Indian markets are more high touch than other global markets, so they're not
Right.
designed for that.
That's true. While I think they have good number of subscribers in India. It must be a large
No,
number.
that's true. It's very
Yeah.
large right now.
Yeah.
But that's not how they structured their company, right? So, and this we see in every industry. When Uber took a while to get adjusted to India, but when they first came in, I mean, same geography. You would find Ola has maybe 10 to almost 50 times as many people as Uber does. They would have like typically 3-person team in a city. That's it. Three
Right.
people running a whole city. Whereas Uber has a full. Ola will have the full-fledged.
Interesting.
So they all rely much more on technology and sort of self-service. That's kind of the philosophy.
Right. Yeah, and they would want to be in auto mode as much as possible. So they have all these AI-enabled support, but it doesn't help too much. I mean, I went into the chat box, but it didn't give me enough options. And also, Subinder, Jitin has joined us. Jitin Handa, your neighbor.
Yeah. Hi,
Right.
Jitin.
We are occupying the bandwidth in our complex. So Harsh's Zoom will be more sluggish now.
Right. So Jitin did a session just close to a week back for the same course on lean canvas. So he really does it well. And so we had a couple of students who are pursuing startups. So they presented, and then we went through the whole 10 yards on that. Right. Okay, so we have students signing in. Maybe just spend a couple of minutes more, and then we can get going.
So I'm just okay. Okay, you need to allow me to share my.
Share, yes, I'll just do that. You can test it out also.
Yeah, that's the part. Is Zoom doesn't allow you to do anything before you've logged in. So
yes.
Unlike in Google Meet and all, you can do all your settings before joining.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And we have another default mode, which is the Microsoft Team, right? That's the official platform for IT Daily students, but they are not so full featured. At least So we have that as a fallback, but it has all kinds of issues,
Yeah,
Um,
Teams apparently is not. I mean, has, like you said, they have issues in large meetings. In
right,
smaller groups, it works just fine.
right, right. So what we will do is we will first start with a little introduction of
Sure.
our speaker, that's you, and uh, set the tone with that. So Mansi, she's our PhD scholar and also she assists in teaching, and Gaurav, so both of them. So Mansi will just extract some information on you and let students know about it, right? And after that, we can get going with the topic, right? So it's any way you want to structure it
No,
uh,
that's
in
fine.
terms of,
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, we can go light on the intros and such. This
okay,
day and age, that information
right.
is very accessible.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
I know, but still
mm,
students need to hear a little bit live for them to sort of tune in.
sure.
So they shouldn't be clueless about the speakers also. They should know where the person is coming from, the expertise they have. So, Mansi, why don't we start with Mr. Khurana's introduction, and I will fill in a few things very briefly, and then we will hand it over to Mr. Khurana to take the session forward.
Yes, sir. Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's session of MSL 306. I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Subinder Khurana. Subinder, sir, has been an entrepreneur with a successful track record. He has built businesses and sold and delivered products and services both in India and globally. He specializes in products and platform based solutions. He's also a venture partner at Omnivore and is also a board member at TiE Delhi. Subinder sir is a story builder and helps entrepreneurs in technology and business professionals build stories that engage, win hearts, and inspire action in their presentations and data and products and data. Subinder sir has also been on the advisory board of several startups, including Dhruva Software, which was one of India's first unicorns, Field Assist, Delight Tree, Enercent, and Power to SME. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out time to speak to the class today.
Thank you, Mansi. And class, well, let me just add a few words to Mr. Subinder Khurana's introduction. Of course, I have known Subinder for a very, very long time, starting from our IIT days. We were contemporaries, but then we again crossed path in Gurgaon, and especially because he's so active in entrepreneurial ecosystem, he works very closely with NASCOM and TiE, as Mansi mentioned, and he really means business in terms of they making progress in their mission, right? So I have always seen him very, very insightful and also very, focused on their making progress. But when I went through his profile, and I've been hearing this from him, which Mansi mentioned that he's the chief architect of Story Process, an organization that tells story, right? It tells story about businesses. So his company helps in telling that story. And what I saw is it brings pictures to life, evoke empathy and understanding, and increase sales velocity. Very interesting words: engage, entertain, educate, persuade, and inspire. And I was really floored by the word entertain. So surely, I think learning and entertainment, they go hand in hand. Also, what really struck me is some of the comments which people who have worked with him have put out there. So, for example, here it says Subinder has unparalleled understanding on Indian startup ecosystem. He's able to identify and articulate the core of any business very quickly, and I would vouch for that. This is what he goes into. So I will leave the rest because this is, he has some of these accounts are there on his on LinkedIn profile, which I shared with you. But I remember very recently, and many of you would be aware of the students incubation cell. So they had a mentors meeting. They want to build mentorship coming from alumni. So Subinder was invited there, and I also helped them. And very quickly in the midst of the presentation, he was able to make some very compelling points, which really helped identify the core aspects, right? So very insightful with something that stirs up, and there's something that starts shaping a new direction and meaningful direction. So I would definitely vouch for that because I've seen time and again he brings that great value there. And today's topic that he speaks on, the minimum viable product, and we know that that is closely associated with the lean startup concept that we recently discussed, right? And so basically, the stress on the impact of learning, right, in new product development, uh, and uh, and somewhere, the whole objective of MVP being the collection of maximum amount of learning about customers and with the least effort, right? If that is the purpose of going into building of an MVP, and that's very closely in a sort of an iterative manner for the lean startup, right? So I don't know what is a set and what is a superset, but they're very closely interrelated. So having said that, I would just mention that he had done a session last year for the same course, not this course, yeah, for the same course last year, and that has been memorable, and people have really used it. So we are very happy to have him over again to go through this concept, and we have students from two different courses here: ideation, prototyping, and the product viability and market traction. And when I look at the course objectives, this concept is very central. So I would say please pay special attention, and when you're doing that 1 or 2 page write-up, you must dive deeper into it and really grasp a lot from the understanding. You can ask questions from Mr. Khurana, who's also your alum, right? So whichever way you want to address him, I'm sure he would be comfortable with the first name also.
Absolutely.
But yes, so please, over to you, Subinder, right?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Mishra, and I mean, not thank you for those are really kind words. And it's not that long ago that both of us were in all your shoes, pretty much, right? We were students at IIT. It just seems like yesterday, though it's what I think 30 odd years now. And I mean, so what I'll try to do is, try to talk to you the way I would have liked someone to talk to me then, right? It's there's a lot of stuff you can find in textbooks, in on the net nowadays. What I'll try to do is get over. So there are some basics we will cover today, but what I'll try to do is spend the maximum time on stuff which you cannot find very easily on the net, right? Things which are not either not there or not obvious from the material that's there. And so what I'll focus on is three things. I'll focus on, MVP is now a very controversial topic in some circles, and I'll focus on what that controversy is and why that's so. The second thing is I'll focus on, the basics of why an MVP. What does an MVP really mean? And why do you build one? And that will address a lot of the reasons why people make mistakes with it, how not to do it. And that also addresses a lot of the controversies. So there are a lot of controversies, but I believe they come from a misunderstanding, a fundamental misunderstanding of the concept or the intent behind MVPs. And the third thing, I'll tell stories. I'll connect up the concept with some stories. And in fact, I'll try to bring some learnings, which, as Professor Mishra and before that Mansi also alluded, I'm building a new venture right now, story process. And a lot of the learnings there, or a lot of how, that venture is coming together, I'll try to bring out some connections to the MVP concept. Sounds like fun? Okay. So I promised stories, and let me start with a story. You can get the okay. So there's an image up on your screen. I hope that image is visible to everyone.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, good. So this image on your screen has a very interesting story behind it, right? And we'll see what that story is and why it's how it connects up to an MVP. There's a very interesting technology play here. The image is a satellite image or a aerial image of land of farmland where from the sky you can see irrigation issues. So there are different colors, right, depending on how well irrigated that portion of land is, right? And obviously we know that you need a certain amount of irrigation for crops to thrive, right? So if we have poor irrigation, we will get poor output, which of course hurts everyone. Okay, but from the ground, it's not easily visible where you have excess irrigation and where you have inadequate irrigation, and both are bad, right? Excess irrigation, we all know we have a water problem. We don't want to over irrigate. More importantly, over irrigation also hurts the crop productivity. So from all aspects, right, we want optimal irrigation. An aerial image gives you, you know, literally a bird's eye view of where things are good and where things are bad, right? And depending on the soil conditions, sometimes you have soil issues, sometimes you just have too much water or too little water, right? So we know how to solve this problem. But the issue is the farmers who are actually doing the irrigation, they don't know how to uh, spot these issues, right? So when you're on the ground, how do you tell, right? And and this is true not for all resources. I mean, we're talking about water here, but same thing is true for fertilizer, for pest control, for other kinds of nutrients. You overdo. I mean, we all know about the urea problem. Too much urea is kind of killing our water bodies and is causing a problem in terms of the marine life or the at least you know, the the fish and other life in ponds. So this is a generic problem we have. It's a huge problem, right? Everywhere. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about the story of an entrepreneur here, Ash, and as you can guess, an entrepreneur of Indian origin, who saw this problem, said, "Great, you know what? I can solve this. I can solve this with drones. My drones will take spectral images from the sky, right? Analyze them and tell the farmer where they need to add more water, where they can cut the irrigation, right? Make sense? Straightforward." He said, "Okay, I'm going to build a drone." And interesting idea. It was very timely, right? It uh, created a huge amount of value. So check. Everything makes sense. Except, but, right? There is a problem. How does he know that this thesis is correct? And, a lot of entrepreneurs will say, I believe, I'm convinced. Great, right? That's a good starting point. You need to have that belief and that passion in what you're doing. But for your own sake, don't you need to validate, right? In case, just in case, you're not perfectly, there is a flaw in your idea. It's always better to check before you go invest a lot of your time, your money, years of your life in building that. Okay? But not only for yourself, right? Sometimes you may have the right idea, but you don't have the exact parameters, right? You may not know exactly what the level of savings might be, right? Exactly how the usage will happen, exactly what field conditions you will come up with, right? So you always want to know as much as possible before you go build your venture. So you want to refine your idea. Okay, and probably the most important problem is before you can raise funds for your venture, you need to prove it to investors. Now, you may have perfect belief, I know, I believe, mujhe pata hai. But would your investors be convinced by that, right? They want to see data. How do you produce data to convince your investors to bet behind your idea, right? And same holds is true for customers and other stakeholders in your venture. people who join your team also need to be convinced, right? So for all good reasons, you want to make sure that you have solid evidence to back your thesis, right? But here's the funny thing, and as the story will show, sometimes just you might start the MVP just to validate what you think is right, or get more data to refine and support the idea. But sometimes something funny happens, and that's what we will see. So very interesting development here, and those can be life-changing moments. Okay, now let's take a step back, understand the theory in here. When you build a venture, you would have heard this term called the thesis. If you talk to an investor, they'll say, what is your thesis for building this venture? What are they really asking? Okay, what they're really asking is, what is it that right, that others don't know or don't believe, right? So which means, so for example, when Airbnb was being built, a lot of people said, "Nay, this won't work." Why? Because they said, who will allow strangers in their homes, right? Who would open up straight, and who would want to go stay at a stranger's place? Why, if I'm traveling, I'd rather go stay in a hotel where I know there will be a certain standard of service and certain quality I will get. Why would I go stay in a stranger's home where I don't know what I'm going to get, right? So a lot of people said, we don't believe this will work, right? So there was a popular belief that the founders were challenging. That's the thesis, right? Sometimes you have a thesis in terms of there's a new trend, right? So you might say drones or AI or anything new, right? Which is going to fundamentally change how certain problems are solved, or how certain solutions are delivered or consumed, or the economics, right? What is it that you are bringing to the table that is new and that is not common? That's a thesis. Okay. Now, anytime there is something new, you need to test and validate it. So, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of what is a thesis. And if you're building a venture, that's the first thing you should have. You should have a clearly articulated thesis for what is it that you're doing, right? And then go on to test and validate. Great. Now, let's say you've defined your thesis, and like in this case, Ash had already defined his thesis, kind of, poor irrigation or improper irrigation, and that can be solved through aerial imaging with drones. Great. The thesis is a starting point for a business, but that's not a business. That's not a business plan even. To have a business which is successful, you need multiple other things working, right? You need, of course, your technology to work. The technology has to translate into a real product which people can use, which has a certain form factor, which has servicing in the field and so on. You need to have your marketing, your messaging, positioning done. You need to have your sales force. You need to be able to produce. You need to manage your costs. You need to manage your capital, so on and on and on and on, right? There's so many things that a business has to do for a venture to be successful, right? Now, let me just quickly relate this also to my own venture, story process. So I came to this thesis of, we need storytelling, especially when it comes to technology, especially when it comes to enterprise, right? And there was a reasonable amount of indications out there that a lot of smart people were talking about it, a lot of businesses talking about it, right? So I had good indications to begin with that storytelling was very, very important. I'd come up with some techniques which were counterintuitive. um, my thesis is one can take techniques which work well in stories, even in movies. So very interestingly, I study Hollywood uh, techniques and apply them to business story building. And um, my thesis was that will work, and it will result in more engagement, more entertainment. Why do we need to bore? Just because we're talking business, it doesn't have to be boring, right? It needs to be more insightful. It needs to be more persuasive. It needs to be inspiring, right? And that's what storytelling can do. That was my thesis, right? And I even thought that there was a science to it and there's a technology underneath it, right? But before I built that technology, I went and tested it. Before I even decided that, businesses want storytelling, it took me more than a year to figure out who appreciates it, what it takes for them to say, yes, this is something which is important and valuable for me. How will they consume it? What value do they expect? What form they take it in? And I mean, it's taken me a little more than a year to get to the stage where today I have a few international clients who are consuming story building service. And in fact, I just recently signed up Walmart Labs as a client. So early indications are good, right? However, this is a secret. I'm just sharing it with you. We are friends. Don't tell my clients this yet. I don't have a product. I've yet to build a product because I want to first validate my MVP before I build my product. That's a lesson I'll show you why I'm doing that, right? I'm telling you the secret before I tell you why I'm doing it that way. Okay. Now, the problem is, if you go back to this, all these things that have to work, right? If any one of them fails, we have a problem. If suppose you're not able to sell, doesn't matter how good your product is, whether it's good and efficient, and once a customer accepts it, it creates a lot of value and so on. If you're not able to sell, if you don't have a sales channel, you'll fail, right? So it's one of those problems where everything has to line up, right? It's like everything is in a series. You have AND gate after AND gate and after AND gate. So you have to make sure everything works, right? And that's a huge problem, which means um, there's a high probability of failure. And even if one of them even if they're all working but they're not optimal, your venture could be in serious trouble, because let's say you're able to sell but it's very inefficient, right? So the cost of sales is very high, or say the cost of delivery is very high, which means every customer is unprofitable. Again, there's a problem, right? You need to make sure not only the venture works, you get to revenues, but you get to profits, you can grow, right? So there's a whole series of problems. I hope this point is clear, right? So the problem that is, if you just jump in and say, okay, let me build my product, let me go start selling it, which is funnily, which is how most entrepreneurs do it. I can't tell you how many times I meet and really smart people who will go say, I spent 2 years building a product and I've just started selling it. And I say, why did you do that? Right? Because the way they are approaching it is they're thinking it's a lot, it's a lottery I'm bound to win, because they assume that everything will work right first time. If what if it turns out that once you take the product to market, there was some critical flaw with it? Maybe it has more functionality than you need. Now, somebody might say, what's wrong with having more functionality? My friend, the problem with that is you will have a large, heavy product. You will have a complex product, which your customers might say, I can't use this. This is too complicated, which means the product will fail. And a simpler product will beat the pants out of it. Okay, so what you don't want to do is make this mistake of build everything, right? Then go sequentially take it to market. So what is the right way to do it? The right way to do it is, the smarter way to do it is MVP, right? That's why we want an MVP, because we don't want to play lottery. We want to play a game where we have a systematic way of success. We don't want to take chances with our hard work. Okay, now that's what an MVP is for, right? Now, let me just start with, now that we understand why an MVP, right? Ultimately, an MVP is a formula, is a technique, it's a process to build a venture, even when you know what you're doing, even when you have a fairly good idea of what you're doing. An MVP is the right way to build a venture, to take the chance out of it, right? You want to go systematically rather than haphazardly. That's what it is. Okay, now let me just go to what is the common definition of an MVP. And this is a copy paste from Wikipedia. Okay, so guys, I copied this about a year ago, so somebody may have changed it, but this is how it, how I believe it's still there in Wikipedia. Talks about an MVP is a product with just enough features to satisfy early customers and to provide feedback for future product development. And this is actually a pretty good definition. It's a damn good definition. it tells you it's got just enough features to satisfy early customers, and to provide feedback for future development. So those are the three components or three critical aspects of an MVP. It needs to have just enough features, not too much, not too little, to satisfy early customers. That's a very critical requirement, not for some other purpose. And it is there to provide feedback for future product development. Okay, so this is an excellent definition. What's wrong with this definition is it doesn't quite tell you what to do. And a lot of people have been misled by this definition. And we'll talk about what is misleading and what kind of mistakes it comes to, right? And of course, how to avoid those mistakes. Okay. And again, you go on the web and you will find these kinds of pictures on the web. It talks about what is the wrong way to build an MVP and what is the right way to do it, right? So this is the wrong way to do it is you build it one component at a time. So if your final product is a car, you don't go first by building a wheel, because a wheel does not, a customer will not buy a wheel, and a customer, that will not get you any feedback, right? Makes sense. um, the second one is they'll say I'll build a simpler mode of transportation, where I'll build a manual. It's not even a regular bicycle, it's one of those kids cycles, and you graduate all the way up to a car. Now, somebody might say, well, a customer will buy this, right? uh, so what's wrong with it, right? So this is fine, but what's wrong with it? So the what's wrong with this is that you don't get good feedback. So you will not, when you get feedback on a cycle, it doesn't really tell you how to build a better car, right? uh, so a motorcycle user is not a car user, or at least the issues they will face with a motorcycle will not help you build a better car, right? Makes sense. So then they talk about how is the right way to build an MVP, which is you start with something which sort of looks like a car, which works like a car, but doesn't have a lot of the bells and whistles. So the aspect here is that maybe it cannot carry 4 passengers, maybe it doesn't have air conditioning and a radio, right? That's kind of what the author here is trying to convey. That you build a minimum functionality, you start to add more functionality, right? And then you get to a basic car, and then you get to a fancy car, right? Makes sense. Okay. But again, it doesn't tell you enough about what features you can cut, which features you cannot cut. So there is, the question is, how do you tell between the second and the third, right? Because in both cases, you are building a product which is something that a customer will buy, right? So what's wrong with the number two, and what's and not so with the number three? And how do you decide which features to include in each step of the MVP? So that's not very clear. And unfortunately, those are the kind of confusions which lead to some of the problems, or some of the criticism of the MVP concept. So today, if you go search on an MVP, there's a lot of people who are criticizing MVPs on why that is absolutely a wrong thing, right? And that is because the popular notion of what an MVP is incorrect. Okay, because the popular notion that most people, when they say I'm building an MVP, what they're talking about is I'm building a minimum functionality product, or I'm building a prototype, or I'm building a product which is full of bugs. It's okay to have bugs, right? Now the thing is, those are partial truths, and as you all know, there are truths and there are falsehoods, and those are easy to handle. Truths are easy to handle, falsehood are easy to dismiss. The most difficult statements are the partial truths, because you can't completely dismiss them, that they are correct in some ways, but you also can't accept them because they're misleading, right? And this is a partial truth. Okay, so the better definition of an MVP, what I like is, you can call it the earliest testable product. Okay, and then you graduate from the earliest testable product to the earliest usable product, and then the earliest lovable product. So those are the three stages of an MVP. And notice what it's the two aspects you will see here is, first is that it's always talking about it from the customer perspective, that it has to be a product which can be tested by a customer. It can be used by a customer. It can be loved by a customer. It is from a customer perspective. So always keep the product, the perspective of the customer in mind when you're designing an MVP. The mistake is to keep an engineer's perspective, which is unfortunately most of us do, given that we are damn good engineers, sometimes IIT does us a disservice because we keep hearing, "Oh, you're the best, you're the best, you're the best." Well, we're the best engineers, but sometimes that's not what the world needs, right? So the first thing it's telling you is look at it from the customer perspective. Second thing it's telling you is your holy grail, your objective is love, is the customer love, right? And I'm just going to segue into storytelling here for a second. I love this term. Why? Now you go back to your IIT courses. Does this term ever show up in any of your courses? Ever? Do you talk about love at all? Right? But yet we know that is the most important thing, and not just in life, but in business. Customer love is probably the most important thing, or employee love, or passion. Those are all emotions, right? We don't know how to deal with them. We don't know how to create them. At least our education doesn't take us there. That's what we do in storytelling. Storytelling is all about how to create emotions, right? That's what we talk about when I say engagement. That's emotional. Uh, Entertainment, that's emotional, right? Persuasion is emotional. It's in the heart as much or more than is in the brain. Inspiration, it's all emotions, right? Storytelling is all about emotions, and that's why I love this term. Okay, so the first thing is there needs to be a complete product for the user. For you, it's an MVP. No customer wants to buy your MVP. Take that in mind. If you tell a customer, hey, this is my MVP, they'll say, come back when you're ready. Go now, don't waste my time. Come back when you're ready with a real product. So to the customer, you always need to sell a real product, even if it's your MVP, right? What you can do is omit some non-essential functionality, and non-essential has to be from a customer perspective only. You can absolutely omit things like production efficiency. That's your problem, not the customer's problem. You can omit scalability. You can omit automation. You can absolutely omit AI, unless that is absolutely required to give the core functionality that the customer wants, right? So it's all about what the customer's requirements, customer's needs are. Everything else you can omit, right? Anything that you as an engineer want, kill, right? And I go back to, that's the reason I've not built my product yet, because my customers don't care about my platform or my technology. They only care about the stories that I help them take to market, right? So we are helping our, and we're talking global customers, build, videos to help engage with their clients. And all they care about is that video needs to tell a great story. They don't care about how that story was built, right? Whether that was built efficiently, whether that was built scalably, they don't care. But they do want that story needs to be really good, right? And that's all I promise my customers, right? And that's all you need to promise your customers initially. So don't tell your customers I'm building an MVP. You have to tell them this is a product which will do whatever they need done. Okay, but you can omit things like production efficiency. You can omit things like scalability, right? I hope that point is clear, right? And if there's any, just hold your questions. We will take some questions at the end. Okay, so now let's go back to the first principles. Why are we creating an MVP, right? And we talked about that whole prelude about, how your venture can fail because you got one thing wrong, right? So from there, let's derive why you need to build an MVP. What are you trying to do? So the first thing is you need to solve for known unknowns, right? I hope that term is clear. Okay, and I'll just take a second to explain it. Known unknowns are where you know that you don't know something. So for example, okay, let's say we go back to that same story. The question being, if I fly a drone over a field and I get that image, will that image be able to give me sufficient information to be able to tell whether where I need to irrigate, uh, where the irrigation uh, is underdone or overdone, right? So I may not know for sure that the aerial imaging through a drone will solve my problem. That's an unknown, right? But I know that this is an unknown, right? So it's called a known unknown. As opposed to this, there are unknown unknowns. Unknown unknowns means that I don't even know that I don't know something. So I don't know what other problems will come up, right? And what we do is when we sit down before we launch any project, we go and say, let's think about everything that can go wrong, right? Everything that we need to learn. So you will say, well, I don't know if I can build a drone for, let's say, $500, right? Because my customers, want a price which is under 1,000, let's say, right? So you would go do some research or testing to figure out. So you would say, I know that this is a problem, but I don't know the answer yet. That's a known unknown, right? You also have unknown unknowns. Unknown unknowns could be where I would say, you know what, if I take this drone to market, will there be an objection from some other camps, right? Maybe I will have issues like farmers might saying you're killing jobs, right? That's an unknown unknown, right? There might be some political risk, right? There might be some security risk where the government will suddenly say, oh, you're flying drones, and therefore there's a defense issue here. I'll not let you fly drones, right? So those are things which I don't even know, which I can't even formulate the question on. That's an unknown unknown. Where I can formulate a good question, but I don't need the answer, those are known unknowns. I hope this point is clear, right? So you classify, and by definition, you don't even know the unknown unknowns, right? So first thing is you solve for known unknowns. So you go and list out all the things that you need to test where you can formulate a question, but you don't know the answer. And that's what you build the testable product for, to answer. So you would say, for example, I don't know if this will give me good results. I don't know if this will, be producible under a right price point. Right. I don't know what kind of battery life it'll have. You'll make a list of those questions, and you build, same reason you build a prototype, you build a testable product and test and develop those answers, right? So that's your first exercise. And so far it's largely behind the curtains. It's before you take it out to the customer. Okay. Then you tackle the unknown unknowns. So unknown unknowns is where you discover the problems. So this is where you do a test launch, where you do a controlled launch. Okay, and here you need to take a usable product to the market, right? If the product is not usable, nobody will use it, and you will not even find out what the problems are, right? Make sense? So that's your second step in this process. And the third step is, once you know that you have a product which works, which customers will accept, now you iterate and try to get to customer love. Okay. Um, So those are the three phases of your MVP, right? So first principles is, first you figure out what are your known unknowns, try to test for them. You Then you build a usable product and you figure out what are your unknown unknowns and try to answer them. And then the third phase is you iterate to a lovable product, right? Make sense? Okay. And at that stage, once you've got a lovable product, is when you manage your key tech and market risks. Because your key tech risks and your key market risks, if they're known, you address them in the first phase. But most market risks are unknown, right? Market risk can be anything from, my channel will not carry it, or there may be usability issues in the field, or there could be regulatory issues. You try to find out as much as you can, but ultimately you know the answer only when you take it out there in the field. Okay, now I'm just going to talk about another venture, Instacart. Everybody would have seen, this is another very successful venture. And how they launched, it's really, really interesting how they launched. So this is, the founder, again, another Indian, US, an American of Indian origin, Apoor Mehta. He built a prototype to validate the product, and he delivered the first rounds of groceries himself. Okay, now very interesting. So he said, you know what, I believe that grocery shopping will be um, a very big business, right? That was his belief. That was his thesis, because people will want grocery delivery at home for convenience and all the other good reasons. But he needed to validate it. So of course he built a prototype, and he built it in 1 month alone. So not a very full-fledged, not a very complex product. One person, 1 month, he built a product, right? That was his prototype. Then he delivered the first round of groceries himself. He didn't go and say, let me go raise $5 million and let me go, build out these teams and warehouses and infrastructure. He did the first round of deliveries himself. Now, what is the flip side to this? To the customer doesn't care you're an MVP, right? So the customer says, I need the groceries delivered to me, right? They're not going to compromise. All the compromises have to be on the technology or the process delivery end, on your end, hidden from the customer. That makes sense? And this story is repeated over and over. Groupon, how did Groupon start? Groupon started by the founders printing coupons. They printed coupons in their office and they hand delivered them to different offices. Okay, they didn't go build an app and put it on Play Store and promoted the hell out of it and had so many downloads and blah blah. They just hand printed coupons. They went to a local pizza shop, got them to give them a deal, right, and distributed coupons by hand and just tracked how many redeemed. And they said that was my MVP. Airbnb put out an ad on Craigslist. They didn't go build a platform and spend so much money on marketing and all of that. They built they just put out an ad on Craigslist. They threw a few mattresses in their own apartments, and they just saw how many people subscribed. Right? People came, stayed. They looked at the guest experience. They figured out what was the concerns, what were the questions. Then they started to build the product. Right? You will see this in successful venture after venture after venture. Okay. Uh, okay. Can I request holding your questions? Just will not go too long. Okay. And Instacart, by the way, is a unicorn now. So anybody who didn't know that, right? So basically, the point I will repeat again and again is it has to be a complete product for your user. Your user is not looking for an MVP, right? Okay. Where do you start? Okay. So same thing. I'm just going to repeat it in different ways. How do you figure out what is the critical unmet user need? It starts with a user who has an unmet need, and how do you plan to fulfill it, right? And typically there are three kinds of needs that will show up everywhere. There are three kinds of needs, and therefore there are three kinds of ventures. There is a new solution to an old problem. So when, let's say, there's a new technology, that creates a new solution. So AI, for example, is a new thing. AI is creating new solutions to old problems. We see that in field after field after field. Before that, we saw that with mobile. Mobile created new solutions to age-old problems. Before that, the web revolution, e-commerce was a new solution to an old problem, right? That's point number one. New solution to an old problem because of new technology. Second is a new problem. A new problem, usually because of some change in the environment. So COVID has created a whole bunch of new problems. New regulations create new problems. New technologies, new devices create new problems, right? Consumer changes. We all hear about millennials, which is all of you guys. You are creating new challenges, new opportunity, new problems, and new opportunities for new businesses. That's the second kind. And the third kind is where there are whole new business ideas which didn't even exist in the old world. So, for example, um, with the mobile, right? We had something like Instagram. There was no equivalent to it in the old world, right? Or Facebook, there was no equivalent to it in the old world. Of course, you had new avatars of old solutions. So, like Tinder was, something which evolved from an age-old system, right? Um, with technology, it morphed, right? So basically, there has to be an critical unmet user need. right? Then you develop a complete hypothesis, your thesis about, why you're doing this. So who's the customer? What is the channel? What is the ecosystem issues, right? And then you figure out what are your biggest unknowns and your biggest risks. Okay. Um, what is it that you don't know and which could critically, uh, which could critically affect your ability to succeed. So for example, when Airbnb came up, they said, you know what, there is an unmet user need. People want a place to stay which is, either cheaper than a hotel or more intimate than a hotel, right? And on the other side, people want to monetize their homes, and they also would love to have guests who are similar in profile, make new friends, and so on, right? So they develop that hypothesis, but then the biggest risk was, will customers accept it, and what would it take? So what questions would somebody ask before they would go stay in a stranger's home, right? So they said, okay, let's test it out. So that's a known unknown, right? That I would have some apprehensions before I go stay in a stranger's home. What questions would I need to ask? And that's where you build an MVP, right? So once you've gotten a question, then you uh, build an MVP to that. And those critical unknowns can be about technology, can be about product, can be about message positioning, sales, production, delivery, anything, right? If it's an unknown, you need to test it. If you need to test it, usually, I mean, don't jump to an MVP. MVP is the most powerful way to do it, but sometimes you can answer it with simple research, right? You can just maybe go do some research on the net. You can do a survey. There are many ways to test it, but MVP is the most powerful way of testing it, right? When all else fails, you use an MVP. Okay, so let's see in real application, how did Ash do it for his venture? Okay, now before I talk about that, we're just going to do a quick segue here. Pop quiz, right? You're used to this. We are, I used to have a lot of pop quizzes when I was in IIT. So the question is, where do you get your best insights? Okay, and your options are in the lab, in the office, and preferably a cool office, in a coffee shop. A lot of people swear by the toilet seat, or none of the above. Okay. Well, I don't have a mechanism here to get answers. So let's just jump ahead. Okay, guys, none of the above. The only real source of insights is customers. Okay, and this is like, every other day, like yesterday, I got a mail from someone saying, we have this great idea. We'd like to run it by you for validation. And I said, don't waste your time and don't waste my time. My opinion doesn't matter. There's only one person who can tell you whether your idea is right or not, and that is your customer. Okay, and in fact, consulting so-called experts is a disease. I call it expertitis. Guys, don't fall for that. Experts are worthless. It's just opinions. Experts are good only if you have a very structured question which has a technical answer, which is in the area of expertise for that expert. You can ask that question. Otherwise, don't ask for their opinion. Okay, there are no facts inside the building. You have to you have to live with your customers. Okay, you can consult others, and experts also only in the field of that customer. Don't consult a technology expert. Don't consult a business expert. You can consult a functional expert who knows that industry, but trust only customers. Okay, that's your lesson number one. And this is what Ash did. So he said, you know what? The only person who can tell me whether this is a good idea or not is farmers. Okay, farmers. So how did he do it? He just said, you know what? I'm going to take it to farmers. And he said, it'll take me a long time to build a drone. Let's just try something. And this is, guys, the best way to build an MVP. He said, let's imitate a drone. I don't need a drone. Let's imitate a drone, which means he rented a camera. He rented an airplane, right? Expensive, not scalable, doesn't matter. He rented, it was done very quickly, right? he strapped on the camera to the plane. You can imagine it. Underneath the plane, the camera is attached, and he just flew it over the field. Brilliant, right? They just flew the camera over the field. The camera took images. They downloaded those images into a computer, analyzed them, right? And then took it to the farmer and said, hey, can we use this? Brilliant, right? As far as the farmer is concerned, it could have come from a drone. They don't care that it came from a drone or not, right? And Ash didn't have to build anything, right? Because even if the drone form factor was wrong or something else was wrong, no, he has not built it yet. He can fix that. Okay. So they hand process the data. So they didn't even invest in building the algorithm for the for processing that data. They just said hand process the data and let's see if that information is something useful, and not just useful, but farmers would pay for it. Right? Critical. Your customer has to vote with money. They can't vote with an opinion. Right? They can't say, "Ha, bahut acha hai." No, no, no. They have to say, "Give it to me. I will pay for it." Right? That's a lesson you can take to heart. A lot of entrepreneurs make this mistake. They will say, "Oh, I've talked to 50 people. They all love my idea." The next question is, "How many have placed an order?" Oh, no, they just tell me they love that idea, and come talk to me when your product is ready. And I say, I'm sorry to tell you, that's a no. That's a no. Because people like to be polite. They like to be nice, right? They will say, "Oh, bahut acha hai." Who likes to tell you to your face, "Nahi, it's shit." They will tell you, "Oh, it's nice." That means nothing. Okay. If you've got a really good product, people will say, "Build it for me." And I started believing in storytelling when I had, so I was talking to tons of people, right? And it turned out some people, not all of them, some companies, some people started to say, "You know what? I need this. Can you help us specifically?" And then we started to have a conversation. And I would say, how much are they willing to pay? How much are they willing to pay? And it's only when I found there were certain people who are willing to pay enough, who are willing to pay a fair price, what I considered a fair price, which I can use to drive a profit. That's when I said, hey, this is real, right? And you know what? I sold it to them without building my product, because same technique. Right now, I'm delivering it by strapping a camera to a plane. I'm delivering it by hand. Okay, because I can always build the product. But if I build the product and it doesn't fit into what the customer will pay for, I can't fix it, right? So that's what you should be doing is first sell it. Okay. Again, it's a complete product for the user. They don't care that you've done hand processing of the data, that it's not a fancy AI algorithm and it's not using some distributed computing or whatnot. All they care about is, does it give me answers that will help me make better decisions, right? Okay. So when you have to create and launch an MVP, okay, first we talked about, you only get to those users who are willing to pay for it, right? Even among them, you talk to users, only the ones who are screaming for a solution. Because what's good about those is not only will they pay the most, they will appreciate your solution a lot more. They will accept some of the flaws. So reality is, when you first launch, your solution will be bad in some ways. It'll be imperfect. You'll have some errors, right? You will be slow in delivering. It'll have some features which are missing. The users who value it the most will accept it. The ordinary users will not accept it, right? So you need to first go to them. They will also give you the most valuable feedback, right? So and again, I'm applying that to my solution as well. Second thing is, you should be, your first order of business is to test for the critical unknown, right? How much will people pay for it? What features are essential? What features are optional, right? Where do adding more value, where will it give me more pricing power or more value to my customer? So therefore, I will invest more in those functionalities and less in other functionalities, right? And you have to obsessively track all the usage and metrics, feedback, right? Because you remember, it's to maximize your learning. right? As Professor Mishra also said, it's all about education as well in this stage. Okay. And in the early customers, you have to understand their needs and you have to overservice them because your product is less than perfect. You have to overservice them. You have to make sure that you're extracting the maximum learning from them, but also, there's a marketing reason for it. They will be your ambassadors. They will be the ones who will help you sell more, right? If you do a great job with your first few customers, your marketing will become so much easier, right? And guys, don't worry about scalability. In fact, scalability will get in the way. In fact, when I get people who tell me, "Oh, I've got this great solution, I built this great platform," and I'll say, how many users or how long have you been in the market, how much revenue, and they say, "No, it's really scalable," and I know that they're going to fail because scalability, it's like if you don't know where you're going, having a larger ship will only get in your way. It's harder to steer a larger ship. A scalable product is actually harder to maintain and manage, harder to adapt. Okay. Quick and dirty is the way to go. Okay. Post MVP launch, you have to keep learning, and learning is a science. You have to measure. Okay. Learn and iterate, so learn, improve, learn, measure, improve, learn, measure, learn, improve, measure, right? Whichever way you go about it. It's a cycle. Repeat. Okay. That's all you have to do. You do this, a few times, 50, 100 million times, you will get a fantastic venture. It's just rinse and repeat. Okay. Uh, it's an ongoing process. So you started with an MVP, but it doesn't end with a launch of an MVP. Okay. Now let's, in the beginning, I talked about when Ash went in for the MVP and for the right reasons, to collect data, to collect some more information, to build the optimized product for the market. Right before he invested in building a drone, or before he went and raised money, he said, "Let me have an MVP," and he imitated a drone with a plane and a camera underneath it. Right, but he had a surprise learning. You know what? Farmers told him something that he never even thought of. The farmers said, "You know what? We have crop dusters, we have planes." So remember, we're talking about US. So US, what they do is they have planes fly over fields to spray, whatever is required. Crop dusters, what they call, to spray pesticides, for example, over the field. They say we already have the planes going and doing it, right? The planes are already flying. We can just attach the camera to those planes. So you don't need to give us a drone, right? Drone not required. Okay. You just get a commercial camera. You don't need to build it, right? Just give us the image and the analysis of that image, right? So his whole venture changed from a hardware venture or drone venture to an AI software venture. Okay. Isn't that a beautiful learning? Otherwise, can you imagine how difficult it would have been to go there? How much change it would have required to get there? And I've seen that happen with my own venture. When we started, for me, I thought storytelling was going to be about technology, enterprise sales pitches. And I'm finding my best users are building videos. And, some of my best customers are using videos for medical products because they say, we have these really complicated science products and also deep tech products. So whenever there's a science involved, they're saying, sometimes, and we have our audiences, which are expert audiences. We are going to sometimes to doctors, super specialists, to cardiac surgeons, to nephrologists. And, we have these products which are based on science. And, this is an expert audience. I can't talk trivial to them, right? But they have to understand my science to accept the product. So a lot of the work we're doing today is helping these companies explain their science to expert audiences using videos. Something, a year ago, I wouldn't even have thought of, right? And that was a whole new learning because of this MVP. I mean, we kind of iterated to it. through different experiments. And today we're finding that, we're getting, a reasonable flow. And now I'm looking to, so to my mind, it's not a completely validated thesis yet, but this is a thesis with some evidence. And now I'm looking at getting much more, I'm investing in growing that to get more evidence to try to scale it up and to optimize it, right? So we are getting into that. We have the first two pieces done, and now we're trying to see what it could take to get customer love at scale, right? So that is the point about an MVP. An MVP is to manage your risk, manage your learning, but boy, sometimes it just changes your whole business plan. Okay. And I'll end with some common mistakes, right? So this is where I talk about what are the common misconceptions and therefore the common mistakes that we make in MVPs. So, people think of an MVP as something which is a cheaper way to launch, or an MVP where I have to build a simpler product to launch. It's not about that. Sometimes it takes longer to go through that cycle to launch, right? But the idea is, for me, it's taken more than a year to get to this point. But the point is, when you get there, you're sure, you have evidence, you have real customers, you have sales to tell you this is working, right? So the common mistakes are, build a module. No, you should have a complete product. Should have a complete solution, even if underneath there is no product. Okay, to the customer, it needs to be a complete solution. Okay, same thing. Don't build the first phrase of the roadmap. First thing you should be building is building for the critical unknowns, right? Don't do the easy stuff first. Don't do the difficult stuff first, because the easy stuff you can always do. The known stuff you can always do. It's the unknown stuff, it's the difficult stuff, which is what's likely to fail. Get that out of your way first. Okay. Rely on opinions and intent I talked about. Everybody I talk to loves it. No. That's opinions. Don't even talk about intent, because if we say, yeah, I'll buy, that's an intent, that's a statement of intent. No, only worry about, only believe behavior. I only believe when somebody says, give it to me now, or I'm willing to pay for it now, right? That's why Kickstarter was such a great idea, which said, if you believe in the concept, put 10% down now, right? That's voting with money, not voting with just a voice. Opinions are cheap. Okay. Engineer for robust scales, and especially, engineers love to do this, right? They say my product is so scalable and it's got these beautiful tech stack and modules and microservices architecture and blah blah. Forget it, guys. I don't care. Nobody cares. uh, and especially your customer doesn't care. Build it to throw. In fact, when you build your MVP, the mistake is to write code which is flexible and scalable, because what you want to do is test your assumptions and then build it right? So build it to throw. Like we heard in Instacart, he built it in a month. Guys, how scalable or how good could it have been, right? That's not the idea here. The idea is to test your critical assumptions, because once you know that your product works, you can hire the best engineering team to work on it, right? But having a good, well-engineered product will not help you sell. Okay, and this is another mistake I see in a lot of people. They talk about product market fit and they just say, I've got an MVP, therefore I have product market fit. No, product market fit, the actual definition of a product market fit is, as most products out there, even most somewhat commercially successful startups don't have product market fit yet. If you talk to the the people who Anderson Horowitz, for example, who popularized this term of product market fit, they will typically look at a company which is doing maybe $10 million, and they will say maybe this has product market fit now. If you even have 1 million, 2 million in sales, they will not consider that a company with product market fit. So a big mistake is, don't confuse idea validation for product market fit. This is just a pet peeve, right? Nothing to do with how an MVP is to be built, right? You can say my idea has been validated. Don't say I have product market fit. That's a much later stage. Okay, so let's just go back to our friend. Ash and his company, they're growing. They, and this is more than a year ago. They raised $35 million. uh, they to create an impact, creating an impact. Farmers are seeing results. They're helping reduce fertilizer and water usage, right? So the guys, you can, if you build it the right way, you can create a fantastic venture. And you know don't think scalability day one. Scalability should be in your vision, in your mind, but your product doesn't need to be scalable day one. If Instacart could do it without scalability, if Ceres could do it, if Airbnb could do it, you can do it. The main thing is make sure it works well for your customers. Make sure you're going for customer love. You get customer love, everything is possible, right? So, guys, happy to answer any questions, and I hope you all create great stories we'll all be very proud of. Thank you. I'll take questions now.
Wonderful. So guys, I know that some of you had questions. Kshitij, you had a question. So let's start with this process.
Did I already answer that question?
Kshitij, are you there? Or anybody else?
I'm just trying
please.
to figure out if Kshitij
Hello.
is on the call.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Hi, sir. My name is Abhishek Jain. So my question was regarding the slide where you told us about how an MVP should be built. So most of the big companies in their success speeches sometimes tell that they didn't start with a product that they finally were giving out as a product. So you said that in the example of starting off with a motorcycle and ending with a four-wheeler, it should not be that it is not a correct way of forming MVP. But we have seen many examples where the companies have drastically changed their product in different stages of their life, and they have been very successful.
Yes. So I don't think there's any contradiction at all. In fact, you're kind of highlighting the same thing. So basically, it's like this. The difference, I think, is that when these companies pivoted, right? That's what it's called, right? Pivoting, when you change the whole plan or product. When they pivot, it was not something which was pre-planned. They didn't start the venture saying, oh, at this stage we will pivot to this particular product, right? But when you build your MVP, you have an end goal in mind. So the difference is this, that in this picture, you may be going to market with the first one, but you have the fourth one in mind already, right? Whereas what I think, I also said, and what I think you're also saying is that you will discover new things as you go along. And as a result, you will completely change what you take to market, what you actually build. I mean, even Oyo went through the same thing, where when they started out, it was a completely different business model, right? They were trying to be more like an Airbnb, and they quickly realized that that wasn't working. And then they changed to the hotel model. So and this is true in every venture, even with the example I showed over here, the Ceres venture, is that they started out by a drone and then they completely pivoted to a software model, right? So the idea is that you will go through this process, you will learn, you will discover where the actual value creation is happening and build that. And sometimes you might fundamentally change your assumptions or your market, right? Even in my venture, in the last 1 year, I've pivoted a lot. I started by saying, we need to help, startups or tech companies build stories. And now I've pivoted to, international companies and their marketing, help them build videos with stories, right? That's a major pivot, completely changing how we talk about ourselves and how we approach. Have I answered your question?
Yes, sir. Sir, also from your personal experience, how difficult is it as a believer in the first product that you have thought of to pivot from to a very drastically different domain altogether?
So देखो ऐसा होता है कि one thing you will hear a lot of people say this is fall in love with the problem, not the solution.
Hmm.
What that means is that there is there's always, when you're building a product, you're saying, for example, here also, right? Somebody's got a car, right? Now a car is a product, but car is also a solution to a problem, right?
Yes,
The
sir.
problem is I need to go from point A to point B. I need to go with family, maybe, or I need to go there in comfort, safety, right?
Yes, sir.
So the problem is I need to get from point A to point B. The solution is a car. What they're saying is fall in love with the problem, getting from point A to point B. Don't fall in love with the solution, which is the car. Because when you go through this exercise, you may find there's a better way to solve that problem,
Hmm.
right? That's your pivot. So similarly, in the case of the example I showed, the problem was irrigating your fields right, not the drone, right? The drone was a product. They said, don't fall in love with the drone, fall in love with the solution, right? They kept the same solution. Finally, he's helping farmers use spectral imaging to irrigate their fields right, but he's thrown the drone out of that picture.
Yes, sir.
Get my point? Oyo did the same thing. The whole idea was, yeah, people travel, they need a place to stay. That remained, right? How that need is served, the product, that changed, right? So you will find most pivots follow the same formula. That's why they say, fall in love with the problem, don't fall in love with the solution, because you want to make sure you stay focused on the problem, but you are iterating or you're experimenting with different solutions. Okay. So how it translates to me is when somebody comes and say blockchain, AI, blah blah, right? I say you haven't figured out what you're actually doing, right? Because you
Yes.
have not articulated a problem that you're solving, right? Whose life are you going to change? What impact are you going to create over there, right? You're only talking about how, right? That how is something which is disposable, right? But
Yes,
you
sir.
don't have a north star. So start with a north star, right? Your goal in life. Take care.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. Any other questions?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, for the case, if you are solving like 2 or 3 problems for the same customer, then do you have to include all the solutions at a time, or we can include it in a phase wise, so the
So,
MVP?
okay, why are you doing 2, 3 problems? Is one problem not enough to begin with at least?
That's what
So
I was asking, sir. Is it
no,
we have to include all the 3 problems at the same
no,
time while we are launching the MVP, or we can do it phase wise?
you should do it phase wise. Not can, you should. Okay, if you have more than one problem or more than one customer segment, you haven't defined your venture well. You should have a very sharply focused customer segment, and you should have a very sharply focused problem. Okay. Now, having said that, so that's your goal, right? You should know who you're working for and what problem you're solving for them, right? And one only. If you have more than one, either it's because no one problem is compelling enough, which is bad, right? Or you're just being greedy. Leave the other two. You can pick those up later. Uh, Having said that, what I also say is, initially experiment a little bit. So the analogy I'll give is, finally you want to marry one person, right? You want to be married to one person, but it's okay to see a few people, right? It's okay to date, right? Because you don't know who the right person is yet. Okay, but whenever you're, you know, sooner rather than later, you want to get to that point where you find okay, this is what I need in life. This person works, and then you want to get married and you want to be exclusive there, right? So same thing here. You want to experiment with a few, right? I mean, go initially talk to everybody, because you don't know where the real needs are, where the real value is, where the real acceptance is, and over the last, I told you I've been doing it for more than a year now. I've talked to everybody. I've talked to, people in all different fields, all different kinds of companies, early stage to late stage, MNCs to little tiny shops. And it was all to figure out what works. Okay. And figure out what works means, where there is an acceptance and value, where you're able to create something, deliver something which is useful for them, and where you enjoy, right? Where you think you can create a differential. That takes some time to discover. Okay. So, I mean, so the way that you go about it is, initially, you should have some idea of what you're doing, but don't be too fixated on it to begin with. Keep your eyes and ears open, because you may not have the right target segment to begin with. As you talk to different people, you might discover a problem that you hadn't thought of, right? Or a customer that you had not thought of, who might be better than the one you had thought of initially. But once you get to a point where you say, okay, this seems to be working, then you want to go exclusive. You want to go really, really deep, right? Because that's the only way you'll be able to create a valuable, scalable venture. Okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Great. More questions, guys? Shita is still here, or yes, please go ahead.
Being in the area of storytelling, so like as I've heard, like even in the job processes, when you have to present a CV, so like we are supposed to present a story, like as far as I know, and also it is good for in general whenever you present an idea. So like, can you tell us some basics that, or some basic guidelines, or some thought process that you go through while designing a story?
Okay, guys, this is a very long topic, right? I mean, I usually so for example, with Walmart Labs, the session I'm doing on storytelling, it runs over 6 months, and you know, they're supposed to spend, like, practically a day or more a month on that. So this is a very involved question. I'll just give you the 3-minute version of it. So the idea is that we as humans, we all have a mind, right? All our decisions are made through thinking, through logic, through decisions, right? Through the brain and analysis, right?
Right, so like we are fond of narrative fallacy, like as we call it.
Okay, so that's, the first fallacy is that we are all logical people, and we are all logical decision makers, and you present enough data, enough logic, and somebody will be convinced. Okay, actually, humans make decisions, and I say, when you look at somebody and they have the decision, um, you know the decisions, there are 4 decision centers. Brain is only one of the 4 decision centers in a human body. So, and the brain we all know how to deal with. I'm not going to go there, right? Besides the brain, there is the heart. The heart is equally responsible for making decisions, right? And the heart is all about emotions, about liking, right? How many times have we gone with something because it came from a person I liked, right? I bought a product, or I got into an idea, not because I was particularly convinced about the logic there, but because it came from a source I liked, right? Or it appealed to something, a concept that I liked. So that is one, right? Then there is the imagination. If an idea is empowering, right? So the example is, if how many, like, so they say, people who may not have enough uh, even to say buy new clothes every month, spend a lot on children education, right? And some of you may have come from families where your parents actually sacrificed to put you through good education, right? Why? If you think about it, and if I had gone to the same parent and said, for your child's health, here's organic food, which is very expensive, but it's for their health, they might have said, "Nahi, hum nahi kar sakte," right? We'll not do this. But they're very happy to spend on education. Why? Because it's giving them an aspiration. There's always an aspiration that I want to have a different future. I want to have a different personality tomorrow. Mera beta engineer banega, right? That is beyond logic, right? And same thing happens in businesses. People buy for aspiration, right? The third thing is people buy for, or decision making is in the gut, which is highly underrated. And you would talk to some of the best managers, the most experienced people, they say, in my gut, I know something is right or something is wrong. That guy who's crunching numbers with all his education doesn't really know what they're talking about. In my gut, I know it's right. But what is the gut, right? Actually, the gut is a low bandwidth pattern matching machine. A low bandwidth pattern matching machine. So what the gut says is the moment you start throwing data, the gut gets overwhelmed because it's low bandwidth, right? But if you give it the right pattern, right, it's a very powerful machine, and it's something which overrules the brain all the time, right? So in storytelling, we talk about how do you brain sab theek hai, everybody knows how to do that. How do you get to the heart? How do you get to their imagination, and how to get to their gut? And if you can do that powerfully, people will be inspired, right? People will be emotionally engaged with you, right? And they will be persuaded beyond what logic can do. Okay, that's what storytelling is all about. Why it's called storytelling and how we do it comes from actually the techniques that are used are actually the same techniques that are used in stories. So believe it or not, when we build a pitch or when we build a video, we always follow the structure of same structure that movies use. We start out with a scene which gets somebody's attention, gets them emotionally involved, and just like in any good movie, you will have a point where there is a struggle in between the hero. There is a hero in the story, and that hero has to fight certain elements. They go through some troubles, and at the end there's a climax with a happily ever after, and there is an emotional ending, and there is a transformation. We apply those same techniques to our story building, right? So long story short, what you need to do is make sure you're talking not just to their logic, but talking to their heart, what it is that they want, their desires, right? You're talking to their imagination. You're exciting them about what they could be, right? How you can change their perspective or their outlook in life. And you're keeping it simple because their gut doesn't like complexity, right? Their gut likes simple things which match patterns that they're already familiar with. Okay, and if you include those, whether it's your resume, whether it's your sales pitch, whether it is just an email or a blog post, all of those, if you take those elements into account, right? Uh, Start out with something which catches their attention, keep the emotional quotient high, during, end with an inspiration, keep the message simple so that it goes to their gut, and include visualization so that you're evoking their imagination, not just their logic, and you end with an inspiring message. You will have a much more powerful message, and that's storytelling. Okay? That's the short version.
Thank you so much, sir.
Wonderful. Right. So I had some thoughts, Subinder, right? And one thought may not be on, let's say, startups or product, but just when I was listening to your explanation, you essentially you built up the construct of MVP. But can that be used elsewhere? For example, Um, do you think students should be building an MVP of a fulfilling career where they themselves are market, their aspirations, right? How open they should be about pivoting in their career? Because I know that I have pivoted several times
Yes.
In my career, right?
Yeah.
I'm just as a sort of a broad sort of just to clarify the concept of MVP, in personal terms. That's why I raised this question. What's your thought on it?
No, excellent question. Excellent question. In fact, uh, absolutely. I think we're all going through that stage, right? I mean, I mean, I think we all go through these major changes, and something that earlier would have been unheard of, right? Unthought of, that you would pivot in your life, especially that stage in that late in your career. So the thing is, first thing is that today's students, especially, this is what I tell my kids also, is that be prepared for a lot of change and dynamism in your careers. You have to be constantly learning. So one of the aspects of MVP, which I talked about, is you're always in learning and experimentation mode, right? And for all you guys, guys, you will not have a career the way it's we know of as a career in the past. Expect that in 5 years you'll be doing things which don't even exist today, right? Expect that by the time you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, you will be doing things that are not even imaginable today. Even today, there is data which says that in some advanced economies, for example, in the US, about 50% or more of people are employed in jobs which did not exist 5 years ago. Half the people are in jobs which did not exist 5 years ago. So fast forward that to today, you're sitting today and you can look at the jobs out there and you will say, in 5 years, I will be in a job which doesn't exist today. Right? So how do you prepare for a job that you don't even know about, that it doesn't even exist today? Right? So it's an MVP problem, but it's an MVP plus plus problem. It's not even right, because an MVP starts with, okay, there's a certain end goal in mind, or there are certain certain assumptions, or certain sort of risks I can see. Uh, how do I map it where I don't even know those risks, right? Where I can't even formulate a question. So the first thing is be prepared for that. First thing is be prepared for continuous adaptation and continuous learning, right? So, you'll be using technologies which don't exist today. You'll be working in business models, industries which don't exist today, which means you have to continuously learn. So learn to learn. That's the first thing. Two is be flexible. Don't get too wedded to anything in life. Especially don't get wedded to a job with a paycheck. Don't get wedded to a company who employs you locally, right? And I'm kind of trying to do that. I'm a little, it's something which is a foreign language to me. It will be like a native language to you, but as I'm building my new company, I'm thinking that way. So I'm trying to hire people virtually, in anywhere in the world. I'm saying, you're sitting in Europe, not a problem, join my company virtually, right? Don't need to join me full time. No, let's get started. We like each other. We can take it to graduate it to a more, continuous, more full-time engagement, right? Those are models which will evolve more and more in the future. So that has huge positives, right? More flexibility, more freedom, huge negatives, right? You have to keep selling all the time. You have to keep learning all the time. There'll be new stresses we haven't even thought of. There'll be isolation. There'll be, there'll be loneliness, there'll be risks, and there will be fears which we haven't thought of, right? So that's the second part. The third part is having, I think what you were saying makes so much sense. Having an MVP mindset says that, what, I'm falling in love with a particular problem, not with a solution. That's the core principle of MVP, where you say, the particular problem is, I want to add value in a certain dimension, right? But don't get too wedded to the solution, which is, I want to work in such and such company, or I want to work on such and such technology, right? Or I want to have such and such job title. those things are up for grabs. They will keep changing. Okay. So, now here's the difficult part, which is that it's fun to experiment, it's fun to play around, but the real value comes from going deep with a commitment. Right? You get to do really good stuff. You get to derive value only when you go deep with something and build it over some time and go deep. Right? So this is a contradiction. Now I'm telling you two different things. One is I'm saying, stay open, experiment, right? Be flexible. On the other hand, I'm saying, no, commit, go deep, spend more time, right? And that's a delicate balancing act. And that's going to be the most difficult one for people. If you do it too short, you will end up creating the excitement but not get the value. It's like if you run your venture for 2-3 years, chances are you will make nothing out of it. Zilch, right? You have to stay with a venture 7 years, 10 years, 15 years to really make good money out of it, to really create an impact, to really get to some place, right? The opposite is also true. If you stick with a bad idea for a long time, you could end up ruining your chances, right? So you have to be on the lookout, you have to pivot, you have to, right? It's a balancing act. I don't have a good answer for it, right? Everybody has to figure it out for themselves. I can only tell you the considerations that you have to keep in mind as you do that. I hope that was helpful.
No, I think that's very, very insightful. And one idea, one thought coming to mind, if learning is a constant here, a continuous, so the role of self-discipline, because I know that, let's say MVP, it's good to have a hypothesis and then be open to kind of do away with it if necessary, if the learning tells you that, and you iterate in that manner to build it, to make it progress. But I think that in learning, that self-discipline part, is so critical, and especially if you have any thought on that for the students, because what I've seen is a lot of times learning is taken relatively casually, or let's say maybe we don't. I mean, and I identify with that. I identify with all students. I wasn't always the most disciplined learner, right? But do you think there's a self-discipline involved in this whole process?
Yeah, absolutely. There is. Like anything good in life will not come without discipline. But there's equal parts. There's discipline and there is passion, right? And the passion has to come from. It's about and I've seen it with so many. We've seen people, right, who seem like they were like the most indisciplined, most vela guys, and suddenly they find their calling and they become the most serious, the most committed people, right? So sometimes it's also a matter of it's like when you zoom into something, then you have to go real deep. So the I'll tell you the principles that I believe in, not necessarily follow. So at least do as I say, don't not as I do. But first thing is, you should always get exposed to different ideas at every stage in life, right? So make it a point to read stuff outside of your field. Make it a point to talk to people, get connected into disciplines outside of your own, right? So I like to have, I mean, if I like to look at the circles I'm into, right? Of course, the entrepreneurial and tech circles, but then I'm finding I've got connected into people who are into, some other fields as well, right? Like, for example, the medical science field, or into some art field, right? Or there are different tools, right? So if you subscribe, so for example, you go to Medium and you subscribe and you read. So first you make sure that you're reading for, at least half an hour to an hour every day. But you're reading stuff which is outside of your domain, right? So you can just go subscribe to some publications, right? So I'm learning so much about agriculture, and therefore, not just agriculture as a field, but then there's a political side to it. There is a science side to agriculture. There is a biotech side to it, right? And it's so interesting, and there's so much happening there that which if in a different field we can't even imagine, right? And so kya hota hai, when you learn new things, right? Or similarly, when I go into storytelling, I'm taking courses from Hollywood screenwriters, right? And it's shocking sometimes. They will say something that is simple and obvious to them, and it's just mind blowing for me. And I take that concept and apply it to my world, and it's mind blowing for the people I take it to, right? Because they've never thought of it that way. So for example, I'll hear an entrepreneur's pitch, and I'll ask, "So who's the hero of your story?" And they go like, "Wow, I never thought of it." Right? And that changes the way they think completely. And it's not something original. If I go hear a Hollywood screenwriter, they'll say, "Idiot, how can you even think of something without having a hero in a story?" Right? That's not even 101 for them. So it's a so cross fertilization. That's another thing that I encourage everyone to do. And then so there's somebody very smart who told me he makes it a point to attend one conference a year, which is in a completely different field. It can be something stupid, that, or at least what I think of as stupid, right? Just to hear why people even have conferences in that field, right? What are they talking about? What are the basic burning issues in their minds? What are the considerations? Because it helps you open up your mind, right? And a lot of people say, go hear opposing views. So whether it's a certain political view you have, or a certain social view you have, maybe you are, let's say, pro something. Let's say it's pro-choice or pro, um, you know, um, pro gender choice or whatever, right? And then you go hear the opposing view, nothing else, just to see how people think, right? Uh, and I'm not saying go get converted, but it really opens your mind, because tomorrow those new thinking skills is all you will have as you go into a completely new world.
Absolutely, a great point. And the point of exposure that you brought earlier, and that helps in finding the passion. More exposure you have, maybe something would really click with you. And that's one of the reasons why we in this course, or in these courses, I have people like you, who are coming and giving a different kind of exposure, because students are continuously listening to me. I think they're not getting enough exposure, right? Or they can benefit from that exposure, even if similar concepts are being talked about, but the way you would bring it alive, the kind of story that you will weave around it, the kind of examples, right? Something may strike, as you said, in the case of a Hollywood storyteller, the word hero, it struck me also, that there's a hero in your MVP, what is that, or in your idea. And yeah, I couldn't agree more with the concept of reading, and the value in that. So I always admire people, and I see a lot of substance coming from people who read. They have a different. Bill Gates reads, so do you.
Yeah, that's not the only thing we're alike on.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Students, more questions? Anything? Yes.
Dr. We have Kashish Jain who wants to get a view on his MVP for his product. So Subinder, Kashish has an interesting idea, concept, where he wants to make the life of your smaller retailer in semi-urban and rural areas a little bit more easy. And Kashish, you're online?
Yes, sir.
So you want to get it's kind of an e-commerce tool that is geared towards the smaller store owners. So if you can imagine, Subinder, nowadays in the wedding season that has been going on, a sari shop in those key areas, Nagar or wherever, right? They've got so many different models of saris. And when a customer walks in there, most likely we spend trying to figure out what the customer wants to see first. And there's a hit and miss. So as a result, the store owner feels that I'm not able to serve all my customers equally well. And so, it could be a sari shop, textile, garment store, a small electronics store, it could be, anything of that nature. So it will be an alternative to an Amazon or an Amazon, Flipkart, Shopto, Snapdeal, etc. But it's for the smaller retailer. So there's a better matching between a customer's need and what the shop owner has to offer. Right. So Kashish, chime in and then, ask Subinder sir whatever questions you have about how you could go about your MVP or any thoughts he can share with you.
So
Yes, sir, definitely. Yes, sir.
before just quickly. So, before you, two things you should do before you even have a firm idea. You should talk to some potential, some retailers, your potential customers, and actually get a very crisp definition of the problem. Okay, what problem they face, and what value you could add to them. Okay, and second thing is you look at, for example, Amazon is doing a lot in that area, right? You look at large competitors and see why they're not able to solve this problem. Have you done these two steps?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then, what is your definition of the problem for these guys?
So my basic problem is कि like जितनी बड़ी giants like Amazon, Flipkart, Shopclose, Myntra, ये सब retailers पे focus नहीं करते. इनका main जो focus होता है वो होता है wholesalers या फिर direct factory products पे.
अच्छा.
तो मेरा problem basically retailers की problem solve करने के लिए. And मेरा main जो project का.
हाँ. But sorry.
Like मेरा main.
हाँ बोलो. Okay.
लाइक मेरा मेन प्रोजेक्ट का एम जो है वो इनको लाइक इनको प्रोडक्ट्स ऑनलाइन लाके इनको अमेजोन एंड फ्लिपकार्ट से कम्पीट करना नहीं है. मेरा जो मेन प्रोजेक्ट का एम है वो लाइक इनकी शॉप का प्रोडक्ट जो है वो इन्हीं की शॉप पे अपन ऑनलाइन मतलब व्यू कर सके. फॉर एग्जांपल आप इनकी शॉप पे गए, एक क्यूआर कोड स्कैन किया, उससे आप इनकी जितनी भी शॉप के जितने भी प्रोडक्ट्स हैं आप सबको आपके फोन पे एक्सेस कर सकते हो, सिर्फ उन्हीं की शॉप पे पर्टिकुलरली.
ओके, पर ये ना तुम्हें पता है ये बहुत लोग कर रहे हैं ऐसा कुछ ना कुछ, सम वेरिएंट ऑफ दिस, मतलब नॉट एग्जैक्टली ये वाला, बट इसके मिलते जुलते सोल्यूशन में एटलीस्ट 50 कंपनीज कर रही हैं. ठीक है, एक ये कंपनी भी थी, बहुत इनको फंडिंग भी मिली, फिर रिलायंस ने खरीदा है इस कंपनी को. इनफैक्ट रिलायंस जियो इज टॉकिंग अबाउट द सेम थिंग, राइट? तो So I don't want to discourage you. मैं पहली चीज ये कह रहा हूँ कि बहुत लोग ट्राई कर चुके हैं इस चीज में. So it'll be good for you to understand कि ये लोग क्या कर रहे थे जो कि नहीं चला है. ठीक है, मैं एक मिनट, वो कौन सी कंपनी है यार जो
Is it in the hyper local market space?
So hyper local also. This is a company which was recently acquired by Reliance. एक सेकंड, मुझे नाम इसका भूल रहा है. I know the founder. Let me just look it up.
Meanwhile, I could just mention that some MBA students also have. They're new. I mean, they're also just 6 months old into the space, but they have an idea roundabout in this space. And Jitin, you know about them.
बहुत लोग हैं इसमें. Okay, I'm sorry, मतलब, so just saying this idea is not good enough. You have to really go specific.
Was it haptic?
No, not haptic. Now floats.
How do you spell it?
NOW.
Float.
Floats.
Now floats. Okay. Kashish, make a note of it, please.
Yes, sir. I have noted it.
Yeah.
ठीक है. So vision at least उनका ये था. मुझे पता नहीं उनकी implementation कितनी रही है, क्या फ्लॉ रहा है, क्या नहीं रहा है. बट जो जनरली मैंने देखा है, विद द रियली स्मॉल शॉप्स, द थिंग यू हैव टू वरी अबाउट इज, पहली चीज तो उनकी जो एक्विजिशन कॉस्ट बहुत हो जाती है. मतलब एक छोटी सी शॉप के लिए यू नो यू विल हैव टू सेंड अ गाय देयर, वो बंदा जाएगा, एक मीटिंग में नहीं होता है, मल्टीपल मीटिंग्स रहेंगी, राइट. तो एक्विजिशन ऑन बोर्डिंग कॉस्ट बहुत होती है, और वो बंदे टेक savvy नहीं होते हैं, तो उनको पूरा हेल्प करना पड़ता है, राइट, उनकी उनकी ऑटोमेशन में. तो दैट्स नंबर वन. नंबर टू इज कि इन्वेंटरी जो होती है ना, स्टॉक की, उसकी अपडेटिंग बहुत ऑपरेशनली इंटेंसिव है. लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल, उसके पास कोई नया SKU आ गया, राइट, या कुछ आउट ऑफ स्टॉक चला गया, योर ऐप विल नॉट नो, राइट. तो उसमें डेटा अपडेट कौन करेगा? और ये लोग नहीं करते हैं, दे आर वेरी अनडिसिप्लिन्ड अबाउट इट, राइट. तो अगर ऐप गलत इंफॉर्मेशन देगी, कस्टमर विल ब्लेम योर ऐप, राइट.
Yes,
So
I have seen this problem.
right, then the third problem would be कि the value is so small. मतलब अगर उस पे सपोज सब कुछ ठीक कर दिया, बहुत मेहनत की, सब कुछ कर दिया, उसके एंड में अगर 10 transactions हुई, which is a lot for a small shop, like how much can you charge them, and whether that can cover your cost, right? So ये models तब चल जाते हैं when you have either you have a very big ticket size, तो ताकि उनको जो सर्विस करके भी प्रॉफिट बन रहा है, या फिर उसकी ऑनबोर्डिंग और मेंटेनेंस पूरी डिजिटल है, where you don't have to get operationally involved, राइट. कि उसको सोल्यूशन दे दिया, वो अपने आप सॉफ्टवेयर को चलाएगा, अपने आप डेटा अपडेट करेगा, तब ठीक है यार. इवन इफ यू अर्निंग 100-200 रुपीज, यूर ओके. बट इफ इट्स के 100-200 रुपीज आ रहे हैं, बट हर महीने बंदा भेजना पड़ रहा है वहां पे, यू विल नेवर मेक. I think those are the problems that people face with these really small shops.
Right.
Kashish, you're okay? Can we move on?
Yes, sir.
So, Subinder, one of the questions that came, I'm not sure if Kshitij was able to ask you this or not, was he felt that if you can elaborate a little bit about how MVP could work for a B2B business idea.
Yeah, so the concept is the same. For a B2B, in fact, it's easier in a way because a B2B customer usually expects service. Okay, usually, I'm not, and they will never say no to service. Whereas for a B2C, it's typically small ticket size and so on. It's harder to do that. So you have to have a complete product that you need to hand over. In a B2B, it's actually much easier because you can, they only want an outcome, right? So, and I can give my own example. Today, when I'm going to a client, I'm not saying there is a product at all. They don't care that I have a product or not. They're only looking for the outcome, right? So even when I build a product tomorrow, it will only help me produce the outcome in a better way. And only when the product is really mature is when I might hand over portions of it to them and say, you use it directly for a part, right? So in a way, to my mind, this concept works better for B2B. And usually there is more time also. In fact, in the past venture also, I sold this to a large MNC bank, a different venture. And at that time, what happened was that they said, yeah, we love it. We did a few kind of test trial runs. And they said, हमें चाहिए लेना है. And I said, to onboard the system, it will take about 100 days. They said, bus 100 days mein ho jayega. Seriously, right? And they were right. It took about 6 months to actually get started. And the reality is I built the product during that period.
Okay.
So during the sales, they said, does it do this? Does it do that? Does it do that? I said, yes, yes, yes. Because, I built it. Right.
So, but a follow up on that, like customers are more likely to tell you whether they're gonna buy it or not, or they can let you know that, like, if I want to sell maybe a small product to them, I can go ahead and see my stats in terms of maybe after analyzing 100 people of the crowd, 50 people or 60 people go ahead and buy it, or are willing to spend that kind of money via service, etc. but on a rudimentary level like us, we don't have access to those businesses, or we don't have access to those contacts. So
Uh, okay, so guys, I'll say two things. First is, don't expect that as an entrepreneur, you have a privilege to have access to customers. Nobody promised you that. Okay, you have to earn it. ठीक है, so अगर नहीं है तो मत करो. मतलब, nobody has promised you that you have to be able to build a B2B venture or any venture you like, and therefore you deserve access to those customers, or you deserve a way to get there. No. If it requires that you go earn your credentials, if you have to go, work for a few years somewhere, build your trust and your networks and your credentials, so be it. Right? Nobody promised you that a venture will be there for the asking. Second thing is, make the best of what you have. Yeah, I mean, I know 17-year-old kids who have built ventures with global customers. So it's not that it cannot be done. Obviously, it's not easy. Nobody promised it would be easy, right? Nobody said it'll be fast. Don't expect it to be fast. Okay. Having said that, you have a lot more going for you than you probably understand. You guys, you can go out to your alumni network, right? But you have to make sense. Again, people, some people might give you access just because you're from IIT. Some people might give you access, but they will demand a little more, show some reason that you deserve it. But बहुत resources हैं यार. Go learn, go do something simple, build up. Maybe you work for 10 companies who are not quite there, and then you get access to the one company who's there, right? Maybe you do your research, and you're able to write an email which makes sense to somebody who's sitting in a position of power, and then your background, so you look at IIT alumni in your target industry sitting in positions of power, but then you write to them with some credibility. Don't beg and plead, care, please, because you're from IIT, from IIT, give me 10 minutes. I get a lot of those mails. I completely throw them out. I don't waste my time with it. But if somebody talked sense, right, they were able to say, yeah, here is a problem I can help solve for you, right? You've done some homework. You guys are smart enough to do that. Thodi mehnat maroge, right? And you have access to some resources who can help you sharpen that message. But if somebody sends a meaningful message, you know what? You will find people are more than willing to talk to you. Okay? So it's both. Don't overestimate what you can do, right? Or what you should be able to do. Don't look for easy answers. Okay, that's not what an entrepreneur does. But if you go about it, you have much more going for you than you probably realize. And you can achieve great things, by applying your mind and working hard at it.
Well, that's a great point. That's really a great point. That we should not feel privileged. Nevertheless, we should have the real value proposition, even for our network. So that they can align with it. Because I remember first time when I entered IIT, Raja Ramana, who was the atomic energy scientist, in his opening speech, and I spent my first year in IIT Bombay, right? He said, "You guys are the cream of the nation," right? Now, for next 1 year, everyone floated in that idea, right? But really, the point that you have brought across, and that's true for anyone and also for startups, is that if you have a compelling proposition that you have hand built, that you really have sweated on, and you really believe in it, that's what attracts like a magnet, much more attention. And definitely, I think the network is willing to help and come up, and they're getting more proactive. But this is the right time to do take your ideas seriously and go forward with that. So I really take that point.
So I have a small question. Like we have a very diverse journey from being an electrical engineer to mastering the art of storytelling. So like what I observe is people from people in industry expect us to do more in technical roles, like coding or some extra technical roles. So like going into something like storytelling, it's not that very easy. So like doing a MBA helps in that or what are your views about that?
Okay, I mean, no, MBA doesn't help with that at all. And thing is, nobody will tell you I want you to do storytelling. But having said that, it all depends. I think companies are changing. So let me just start with that first. I think a lot of companies, a lot of employers are also realizing this. Did you know that Microsoft has a chief storytelling officer, and they have a full-fledged storytelling team in their company? And Microsoft is not the only company who does this. Walmart Labs, I mentioned earlier, I mean, I'm going to be training their engineers and product managers on storytelling. They're spending good money to have that done. So it's not that companies don't appreciate it. So let's get that right first. Having said that, when you're going into an entry level role, look at it from their perspective. They don't want people coming in, they don't want to have too many different profiles, right? They will define a standard profile, and they'll say, if it's a large company, they might hire a few hundred or a few thousand people into that same profile. So they want to define it to a very basic level, right? So they'll not tell you, I expect you to do storytelling. Okay, not at that level. It's a skill that you bring to the table to help you perform better, right? So don't learn something because somebody says, check this box and I'll pay you more, or you get a promotion. You do it so that you can produce better work that will help you create a larger impact and get more value for it. Okay. And to my mind, it goes back to what I was talking earlier. Say there is a core job, core skill, right, that you get committed to, let's say, for 5 years, but you're always learning. You're always learning outside of that field. There could be new skills, there could be new industries, new ways of thinking, new political viewpoints, right? That's one way to learn. Okay. So short answer is, companies today, most companies are very open to, in fact, very encouraging of people, their teams, their employees learning new skills. They don't put that in their job definitions because operationally that's not how they can manage it. Okay. But if you're thinking from a career perspective, that's the wrong way to think about it. Think from a growth perspective. Career is a side effect of how you grow and how you create value, right? And either you can be somebody who looks for a job and fits into it, or you can be somebody who defines who they are and then creates a job around them, right? That choice is yours. And if you're constantly learning and reinventing yourself, you will be able to define new fields altogether. Today, there are no companies in the world which says, I'm here for engineering storytelling, right? I bet you 5 to 10 years from now, that will be an established field. And I want to be somebody who's defining what that field will be all about, right? Today, when I hire people, I can't go find people with a storytelling profile. That doesn't exist today, right? So I'm looking for people who learn and who are open to learning, who have the ability to learn, and who have some adjacent skills that we can deploy and then help them grow in that job. So, don't confuse the job requirements with your learning goals. Those are two different things.
Thank you, sir.
So it all comes back to the learning point, and I can tell you this. In the past, when I used to have guest speakers, and that's the common practice, when you have a guest speaker, you would not perhaps find the faculty to be there, as if they have outsourced that work to some guest speaker, right? But I really feel the value for me is also to be able to hear a guest speaker and align or learn from that, right? So it is true for even faculty, just like it is for students. So I think in all concepts that's the underlying theme that I'm able to relate to. It's a continuous learning.
Absolutely.
And it requires a certain mindset. So, folks, just one last question I had. Do you think this COVID-19 with the new normal, right? And of course, we are interacting in a new mode like this in online fashion. Nevertheless, it is less face-to-face, but it's also interactive in a certain different way, which we did not use earlier. So do you think the world after this COVID-19, would it have a different characteristic around learning as to, or dynamism? Would it experience a different sort of a preparedness also from anybody, so entrepreneur or student or employee?
Yeah, short answer is yes. But I think the way I see COVID-19, in fact, it's not just me. I think a lot of people are seeing it that way. I think it's an accelerator of trends. So that trend was already there, right? The trend towards virtualization, the trend towards more online everything, the trend towards more knowledge content and less dependence on physical. I mean, if you go back to when we were growing up, if you don't know somebody, you couldn't do anything. Now it's more knowledge first and relationship second. And I think it's something which was already happening. I think what COVID-19 has done is accelerate a lot of those trends by 5 to 10 years. Right.
Okay.
I mean, we've seen that happen even in practically every industry, right? I mean, Zoom is not a new idea. It's been around for a while. It's been growing,
Yes.
but it just, I think it did 5 years of growth in this 1 year. And we've seen that even in very strange fields, like, even in agriculture, which is an area I only got to learn after I joined Omnivore. And, I still, I still learn every day there. Is we're seeing so much acceleration of trends, so much adoption of new ways of thinking and new technologies. A lot of our portfolio companies who were trying to change the way uh, you know farm produces is managed or taken to market, supply chains or online monitor or the um, on-farm monitoring and all of those things. We've just seen the whole acceleration of that process even in agriculture, which is probably the most lagging field in terms of technology, right? And farmers are much more amenable now to using mobiles, and we've seen so much bigger adoption of mobile tools with farmers than before this, right? So a lot of things I think COVID-19 has brought to the front. It's kind of exposed a lot of the disparities in society. But it's not that they weren't there before, and it's not that they were not growing before. It's just that they've become much more stark. So God knows how it'll actually evolve in the future. Um, I mean, one thing I'd hope for is that some of the pollution benefits will be here to stay, but now we're seeing that pollution is worse than last year. So
Unfortunate, truly unfortunate. Yeah. We learned the lessons very hard. And what I gather is acceleration is one thing that you talked about. It's accelerated, and the other is, the reality is more exposed. So those good concepts to remember. And so I know that we have now gone past our time limit, and those of you who are still here, I always call you leaders, because that shows
yeah, I
a
appreciate
seeking mind
everyone.
of a certain kind. Yes, we really appreciate. And it was a very, I would say, engaging and very captivating a session, for me personally. And I know that students would also vouch for it. So I really want to thank you, Subinder, right, and Mr. Subinder Khurana for students, right, or
Subinder is fine.
that we, yeah, right, and we really look forward to anything in future, right, and maybe there are some students who may want to reach out to you, but yeah, I think the equation is well spelled out. uh, you can always go and say hello to someone, that's always fine, but when you go with a compelling proposition of some kind, then it's a different kind of a relationship, right? So you can expect that it will capture the imagination of Mr. Khurana, if he sees that you are really out there, in a dynamic mode. I'm sure that it'll transpire into something. So great, thank you very much. Any closing thought, Subinder, for today?
No, thank you so much, and I look forward to I hope some of you build great stories. That's what I really, I think you all have great potential. Who better than both of us to know that, right? But it takes more than just being smart to get there. And the fact that you're investing time, this late in the day, just before a long holiday, tells me something, right? So stay with it, guys. It takes time, it takes effort, but it's really worth it when you build something great. So I look forward to it.
That's very assuring, very assuring. And I want to also extend thanks to Mr. Jitin Handa for joining us and be able to assist the process here. He always naturally goes into it. Also to our teaching assistants, our PhD students, Mansi Singh and Gaurav Agrawal, both of them have helped facilitate this process. So thank you, folks. Merry Christmas to all of you, right? We are there, very, very close to it. So let's celebrate love. That's the essential message of the Christ, and enjoy your Christmas. It's not very cold, and enjoy the dinner at the comfort of your home. So we will call it a day here. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Take care.
thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Subinder.
Subinder. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.